Los Angeles, 1972.
I think I found our guy. He's been moving around a lot, but this area seems to be his base of operations.
The police chief's secret safe is emptied without a witness, without a single alarm. $2.3 million classified files and a crate of weapons vanish, leaving only one clue, a French cigarette butt. Who pulled off this brazen heist? And why is the truth still buried in the shadows? The night air in Los Angeles was heavy, as if the city itself was settling into an uneasy slumber. The streets around the Port District, where an aging warehouse complex loomed, were deserted, lit only by the dim glow of sodium vapor streetlights casting long shadows on the cracked asphalt, dusted with salt and grime from the nearby docks. In the distance, the low wail of ship horns echoed, while closer by, the only sound was the steady rumble of a delivery truck creeping toward the gated entrance of Warehouse 17. This was no ordinary storage facility. It was one of the Los Angeles Police Department's secure vaults, used to house confiscated goods. Cash, drugs, weapons, and, on occasion, sensitive documents too volatile for public eyes. But tonight something was different. Tonight, the vault belonging to Police Chief General Raymond Callahan, known to insiders as the General's Safe, was about to become the stage for a crime so audacious it would baffle investigators for decades. Warehouse 17 wasn't much to look at. A squat, concrete structure with rusted metal doors and a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. It sat on a desolate stretch of harbor property, surrounded by abandoned cranes and stacks of shipping containers. Inside, however, was a fortress. Reinforced steel walls, a state-of-the-art for 1972, alarm system wired to a private security firm, and a rotating schedule of armed guards ensured that nothing left the premises without authorization. The General's Safe, a hulking modular vault bolted to the floor in a locked room at the back of the warehouse, was the crown jewel of this setup. It was said to contain $2.3 million in cash, proceeds from a recent drug bust involving a Mexican cartel, along with sensitive files on high-profile informants and a ledger detailing off-the-books operations. The safe's combination was known only to Callahan himself and his deputy, Captain Harold Vance, a man whose loyalty to the general was as unshakable as the vault's steel. The crime, when it happened, seemed impossible. No alarms were triggered. No guards reported anything unusual. The security cameras, grainy and unreliable even by 1970 standards, showed nothing but static for a critical 17-minute window. Yet, by the morning of September 15th, the safe was empty. The cash, the files, the ledger, all gone. The only clue left behind was a single, pristine cigarette butt, stamped with a faint logo of a brand not sold in California, lying in the corner of the vault room. The plan had been in motion for months, though no one would know it until much later. It began not in the gritty Port District but in a smoky backroom of a dive bar called the Rusty Anchor, 5 miles away in San Pedro. Here, on a rainy evening in June 1972, 3 men sat huddled over a table littered with empty beer bottles and an ashtray overflowing with cigarette stubs. The leader, Thomas "Tommy" Brennan, was a wiry 38-year-old with a sharp jawline and eyes that seemed to see through people. A former logistics manager for a trucking company, Tommy had fallen on hard times after a gambling debt spiraled out of control. He was $80,000 in the hole to a loan shark named Frankie Costa, and the clock was ticking. Tommy wasn't a career criminal, but he was smart. Smart enough to know that pulling off a heist like this could erase his debts and set him up for life. Beside him was Eddie "Wheels" Malone, a 29-year-old mechanic with a rap sheet for petty theft and a knack for bypassing security systems. Eddie's hands were perpetually stained with motor oil, and his nervous energy made him fidget with a Zippo lighter as he listened. The third man, Victor Salazar, was the wild card. A 45-year-old dock worker with a quiet demeanor and a reputation for keeping secrets, Victor had access to the warehouse's schedules and guard rotations. He wasn't motivated by money but by something deeper, a grudge against the LAPD who'd roughed him up during a strike 2 years earlier. Victor's inside knowledge was the linchpin of the plan. The trio spent weeks mapping out every detail. They studied the warehouse's layout, obtained through Victor's connections at the port. They timed the guard shifts, noting that the night crew, 2 men both nearing retirement, tended to slack off after midnight, often sneaking cigarettes outside the gate. They learned the delivery schedules, pinpointing a window when a legitimate shipment of confiscated goods would arrive, providing cover for their own truck to slip in unnoticed. Most crucially, they identified a blind spot in the security system. The crime shattered lives, but the story's not over. Subscribe to follow us to the end. A 17-minute gap when the cameras cycled through a maintenance reset, a flaw Eddie discovered after bribing a technician for the system's manual. Tommy's plan was meticulous but not flawless. The safe's combination was the sticking point. Without it, they'd need to drill through 6 inches of steel, a noisy, time-consuming process that risked detection. Victor claimed he could get close to the combination through an old friend in the LAPD's records department, a clerk named Marianne Holt who'd been quietly skimming from evidence lockers for years. Marianne, 52 and drowning in medical bills for her sick husband, was desperate enough to take a bribe. But she was also paranoid, constantly looking over her shoulder, afraid of being caught. "You don't cross Callahan," she'd whispered to Victor during their first meeting, her hands trembling as she handed over a partial list of vault access protocols. "He's got eyes everywhere." The warehouse was quiet, save for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional creak of the building settling. Outside, a light fog rolled in from the harbor, cloaking the area in a ghostly haze. Inside the guard booth, Officers Carl Dempsey and Lou Grayson sipped lukewarm coffee, their radios crackling with routine chatter. Dempsey, 61, was 3 months from retirement and more focused on his fishing plans than the job. Grayson, 58, was half asleep, his chair tilted back against the wall. At 10:45 p.m., a delivery truck pulled up to the gate, its headlights cutting through the fog. The driver, a man in a generic uniform, presented a clipboard with paperwork that looked authentic. A transfer order for a shipment of confiscated liquor, signed by Captain Vance himself. Dempsey barely glanced at it before waving the truck through. "Keep it quick," he muttered, returning to his coffee. The truck was Tommy's. Behind the wheel was Eddie, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. In the passenger seat, Victor sat silent, his eyes fixed on the warehouse ahead. The truck rolled to a stop near the loading dock, where a forklift operator, another of Victor's contacts, paid $500 to look the other way, began unloading crates of liquor that would never be logged. This was the cover, a legitimate delivery to mask their real purpose. Inside the warehouse, the team moved with surgical precision. Eddie, carrying a duffel bag of tools, slipped into the security room and looped the camera feed, creating the 17-minute window. Victor, dressed as a janitor, navigated the maze of crates to the vault room, where he disabled the outer lock using a key Marianne had provided. Tommy, the only one with the nerve to face the safe itself, knelt before the mausler, his fingers trembling as he dialed in the combination Marianne had reluctantly supplied, 42-19-67. The safe's tumblers clicked, and the door swung open with a groan. Inside was a fortune. Stacks of $100 bills bundled and sealed, totaling $2.3 million. Beside them, a metal lockbox held the ledger and files, which Tommy stuffed into a canvas bag without a second glance. The job took exactly 14 minutes. By 11:02 p.m., the truck was loaded, the safe was empty, and the team was gone, vanishing into the fog as if they'd never been there. The theft was discovered when the morning shift arrived. Officer Dempsey, bleary-eyed and hungover from a late-night whiskey, was the first to notice the vault door ajar. His shout woke Grayson, who stumbled to the scene, his face paling as he saw the empty safe. The cigarette butt, lying in the corner, was the only anomaly in an otherwise pristine crime scene. By 7:15 a.m., the warehouse was swarming with LAPD brass. General Callahan himself arrived at 8:02 a.m., his face a mask of controlled fury. "This wasn't a smash and grab," he growled to Vance, his voice low but sharp. "This was an inside job." The FBI was called in by noon, and a task force was assembled under Agent Daniel Whitaker, a 42-year-old veteran known for his dogged pursuit of white-collar criminals. Whitaker's first observation was the cigarette butt, which he bagged and sent for analysis. "French," he noted, puzzled. "Gauloise. Not exactly a corner store brand." The city buzzed with speculation. The Los Angeles Times ran a front-page story, $2.3 million vanishes from LAPD vault, inside job suspected. Callahan, a decorated war hero turned police chief, was humiliated. His safe, his reputation, his secrets, gone. Whispers circulated that the ledger contained evidence of payoffs to city officials, a scandal that could topple careers. The crime shattered lives, but the story's not over. Subscribe to follow us to the end. Callahan's public statement was terse. We will find the perpetrators and they will face justice. Tommy Brennan was already halfway to Nevada by sunrise, the cash split into 3 duffel bags hidden in the false bottom of a pickup truck. He felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. The money was his ticket out of debt, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Frankie Costa, the loan shark, would come sniffing around. Eddie Malone, back at his garage, chain-smoked nervously, his hands shaking as he tried to act normal. Victor Salazar returned to his dockworker routine, but his stoic facade hid a growing paranoia. Had Marianne talked? Had the guards noticed something? And why had Tommy insisted on keeping the ledger? Marianne Holt was a wreck. At her small apartment in Inglewood, she sat staring at the $10,000 Tommy had paid her, stuffed in a coffee can under her sink. She knew the combination had been her betrayal, and the guilt was eating her alive. I just wanted to save him, she whispered to herself, thinking of her husband, bedridden and fading. But the fear of Callahan's wrath was worse than the guilt. As the FBI combed through the warehouse, Agent Whitaker received a call from the lab. The cigarette but wasn't just French. It bore a partial fingerprint, one that didn't match any of the known players. Worse, a routine check of the warehouse's inventory revealed something chilling. A crate of confiscated weapons logged as secure the previous day was missing. The heist wasn't just about the money. Someone had taken something far more dangerous. And in a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city, a man no one had yet connected to the crime lit another Gauloise cigarette, watching the morning news with a faint smile. Los Angeles, 1972. September 16, 8:22 a.m. The morning after the heist, Warehouse 17 was a hive of activity, cordoned off by yellow police tape that fluttered in the salty harbor breeze. FBI agent Daniel Whitaker stood at the center of it all, his notepad already filled with scribbled observations. The air inside the warehouse was thick with the smell of diesel and stale coffee, and the hum of forensic technicians cataloging the scene was punctuated by the occasional shout of an LAPD officer. Whitaker, a lean man with graying temples and a perpetually furrowed brow, was no stranger to complex cases, but this one felt different. The precision, the audacity, the missing weapons crate, it all pointed to something bigger than a simple cash grab. This wasn't a robbery, he muttered to his partner, Agent Karen Delgado, a sharp 32-year-old profiler with a knack for reading people. This was a message. By noon on September 16, the FBI had set up a command post in a nearby administrative building, a drab concrete box overlooking the port. The task force, dubbed Operation Vault, was a mix of federal agents, LAPD detectives, and a forensic accountant named Evelyn Carter, brought in to trace the $2.3 million in cash. The first 48 hours were critical and Whitaker wasted no time. He divided the investigation into 3 prongs: physical evidence, witness interviews, and the missing ledger's contents, which he suspected held the key to the heist's true motive. The cigarette butt was their first lead. The lab confirmed the Gauloise brand, rare in the US, and the partial fingerprint was being run through every database available. Though in 1972 fingerprint analysis was a slow, manual process, reliant on card files and overworked technicians. The missing weapons crate was even more troubling. A wooden box, 4 feet by 3 feet, containing 12 M16 rifles and 500 rounds of ammunition, logged as evidence from a smuggling bust. Its disappearance suggested a second agenda, one that made Whitaker's stomach churn. If those guns hit the streets, he told Delgado, we're looking at a bloodbath. The warehouse guards, Carl Dempsey and Lou Grayson, were the first to be interviewed. Dempsey, still rattled, swore he'd followed protocol, though his story wavered when pressed about the delivery truck's paperwork. It looked legit, he insisted, rubbing his sweaty palms on his uniform. Grayson, meanwhile, was cagey, his eyes darting to the floor whenever Whitaker mentioned the cameras. Delgado caught it immediately. He's hiding something, she whispered to Whitaker after the interview. Not guilt but fear. He's scared of someone. Evelyn Carter, the forensic accountant, was tasked with tracing the money. The $2.3 million in cash was serialized, a standard procedure for large drug busts, but tracking it would be a nightmare. Cash could be laundered through bars, casinos, or small businesses, places where large sums could vanish into daily transactions. Carter's initial findings, however, pointed to an anomaly. The warehouse's inventory logs, maintained by the LAPD's records department, showed discrepancies predating the heist. Small amounts of cash, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, had been mislogged over the past year, suggesting someone inside had been skimming long before the big score. This led Whitaker to Marianne Holt, the records clerk. Marianne, now chain-smoking her way through a pack of Camels, was a nervous wreck when agents knocked on her Inglewood apartment door at 3:15 p.m. on September 17. Her hands shook as she let them in, her eyes darting to the coffee can under the sink where her $10,000 bribe was hidden. "I don't know anything," she said before Whitaker even asked a question. Delgado, watching her body language, noted the telltale signs of guilt. The fidgeting, the averted gaze, the way her voice cracked when asked about the vault's access protocols. Whitaker didn't push, yet. He left her with a warning: "If you're holding back Marianne, it's only a matter of time." By day 3, the investigation had zeroed in on 3 names: Tommy Brennan, Eddie Malone, and Victor Salazar. A tip from a San Pedro bartender who'd overheard Tommy boasting about a big score weeks earlier put him on Whitaker's radar. Tommy's gambling debts and recent purchase of a used pickup truck, paid in cash, raised red flags. A background check revealed his logistics expertise, making him a prime candidate for orchestrating the heist. Whitaker ordered a tail on him, but Tommy was slippery, rarely leaving his rundown apartment in Long Beach except for late-night drives to the desert. Eddie Malone was easier to track. His garage, a cluttered shop on the edge of Compton, was a hub for low-level crooks. When agents searched it on September 18, they found a hidden compartment in his toolbox containing $3,000 in crisp $100 bills, suspiciously close to the serialized notes from the vault. Eddie, sweating under interrogation, claimed he'd won the money at a poker game, but his story fell apart when he couldn't name the other players. "I'm no rat," he snapped, his bravado masking panic. Delgado leaned in, her voice calm but cutting. "You're not a rat, Eddie, but you're in over your head. Who's calling the shots?" Victor Salazar was the hardest to pin down. His dockworker colleagues described him as quiet, reliable, and fiercely private. But a search of his locker at the port turned up a burner phone, uncommon for a blue-collar worker in 1972, and a scrap of paper with a phone number linked to Frankie Costa, the loan shark. Victor's grudge against the LAPD was well known, but his calm demeanor during questioning unnerved Whitaker. "I was home with my wife," Victor said, his voice flat. "Check the time cards." The time cards confirmed his alibi, but Whitaker wasn't convinced. "He's too clean," he told Delgado. "Nobody's this clean." The missing ledger loomed over the investigation like a dark cloud. Rumors swirled that it contained evidence of corruption, payoffs to city council members, kickbacks from drug lords, even names of cops on the take. General Callahan, under pressure from the mayor's office, was tight-lipped, but his late-night meetings with Captain Vance hinted at damage control. Whitaker, sensing a cover-up, requested access to Callahan's financial records, only to be stonewalled by the LAPD's legal team. "This goes higher than we thought," he confided to Delgado, his voice heavy with frustration. A break came on September 20 when a dockworker, spooked by the FBI's presence, came forward anonymously. He claimed to have seen a man matching Victor's description near the warehouse on September 13, speaking to a stranger in a dark sedan. The car's license plate, partially recalled, was traced to a rental agency in Las Vegas, paid for in cash. The description of the renter, tall, mid-40s with a faint European accent, didn't match any of the known suspects. And then there was the cigarette butt. The fingerprint results came back. No match in any criminal database, but the print was fresh, suggesting the smoker had been in the vault room that night. The heist's aftermath rippled through the lives of everyone involved. Tommy Brennan, holed up in a cheap motel near Reno, was unraveling. The $800,000 he'd stashed in a storage unit felt like a curse. Every creak of the motel floor made him jump, convinced Frankie Costa's goons were closing in. "I did what I had to," he told himself, pacing the room, but the weight of the ledger, still unopened in his bag, gnawed at him. What secrets was he holding? And why had Victor insisted they take it? Eddie, under constant surveillance, was drinking heavily, his garage business crumbling as customers stayed away. He'd burned through half his $200,000 cut on liquor and bad bets, terrified of being caught but too proud to run. Victor, meanwhile, maintained his routine, but his wife noticed a change. He barely slept, his eyes scanning the street whenever he left the house. "What did you do, Vic?" she asked one night, her voice trembling. He didn't answer. Marianne Holt was on the verge of a breakdown. The FBI's visit had left her paranoid, and she'd started shredding old records at work, terrified they'd lead back to her. She thought of confessing, of turning over the $10,000, but the image of her husband, frail and dependent on her, stopped her. "I'm sorry," she whispered to his sleeping form, tears streaming down her face. On September 22nd, a new piece of evidence surfaced that turned the investigation upside down. A grainy photo, recovered from a discarded film roll in a dumpster near the warehouse, showed a man standing outside the vault room door on the night of the heist. He wasn't Tommy, Eddie, or Victor. He was tall, sharply dressed, with a cigarette in hand. Galois Whitaker was sure. The photo was too blurry to identify him, but it confirmed what Whitaker had feared. There was a fourth player, someone pulling strings from the shadows. As the task force scrambled to trace the mystery man, a cryptic phone call came into the LAPD's tip line at 2:17 a.m. on September 23rd. The voice, distorted and untraceable, said only one sentence: "The ledger's not what you think it is." Then the line went dead. Los Angeles, 1973. March 12, 9:15 a.m. The Los Angeles County Courthouse was a fortress of marble and authority, its halls echoing with the footsteps of lawyers, reporters, and anxious families. Outside, a crowd of journalists jostled for position, their cameras flashing as the trial of the decade began. The heist of General Callahan's safe had gripped the city for months, fueling headlines and speculation. Now, 6 months after the crime, the key players, Tommy Brennan, Eddie Malone, Victor Salazar, and Marianne Holt, sat in a packed courtroom, their fates hanging in the balance. FBI agent Daniel Whitaker, seated in the gallery, felt the weight of the case pressing down on him. The ledger, the missing weapons, the mysterious fourth man, too many questions remained unanswered, but the trial promised to bring some truths to light. Or so he hoped. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Margaret Klein, a relentless 38-year-old with a reputation for dismantling defenses, built a meticulous case. The evidence was damning. The $3,000 found in Eddie's garage matched the serialized bills from the vault. Marianne's fingerprints were on a forged vault access log. Victor's burner phone linked him to Frankie Costa. And Tommy's truck, impounded in Nevada, contained traces of the same paint used on the warehouse's loading dock. Klein painted the defendants as a cabal of desperate opportunists, orchestrated by Tommy, whose gambling debts gave him motive. This was no random theft, she told the jury, her voice sharp. This was a calculated betrayal of public trust, orchestrated with chilling precision. The defense, a team of overworked public defenders, leaned heavily on reasonable doubt. Tommy's lawyer argued he was a victim of circumstance, framed by Costa's criminal network. Eddie claimed coercion, saying he'd been threatened into participating. Victor's attorney insisted his client was a bystander, his dockworker status exploited by others. Marianne, trembling on the stand, admitted to taking a bribe but swore she didn't know the full scope of the heist. "I just needed the money," she sobbed, her voice breaking as she described her husband's illness. The jury, a mix of blue-collar workers and retirees, listened with stony faces, their sympathy waning with each revelation. The trial's centerpiece was the missing ledger. Klein argued it was the heist's true target, a document so explosive it could bring down half the city's leadership. Callahan, testifying under oath, downplayed its significance, claiming it was merely an inventory record. But his evasive answers and nervous glances at Captain Vance, seated in the courtroom, didn't go unnoticed. Whitaker, watching from the gallery, scribbled in his notepad, "Callahan's lying." What? The trial took a dramatic turn on day 5 when Agent Delgado presented new evidence. A partial reconstruction of the ledger, pieced together from shredded fragments found in Marianne's apartment. The fragments listed names, dates, and dollar amounts, payoffs to city officials, including a councilman linked to a construction scandal. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and Callahan's face went pale. Klein seized the moment, demanding Callahan be recalled to the stand, but the judge, citing procedural issues, denied the request. Whitaker, furious, whispered to Delgado, "They're protecting him. This goes all the way up." The missing weapons crate was another sticking point. The prosecution argued the defendants had sold the M16s to a black market arms dealer, but no trace of the guns had surfaced. Whitaker's team had chased leads to Las Vegas, Tijuana, and even Chicago, but the trail was cold. The mysterious fourth man, captured in the grainy photo, remained unidentified, his Gauloise cigarette the only tangible clue. The defense exploited this, arguing the real mastermind was still at large, casting doubt on the prosecution's narrative. The trial wasn't just about evidence, it was a crucible for the defendants' lives. Tommy Brennan, once cocky and confident, was a shadow of himself. In jail, he'd been attacked by inmates loyal to Frankie Costa, leaving him with a limp and a haunted look. During his testimony, he spoke softly, almost defeated. "I thought I could outsmart everyone," he said, his eyes fixed on the floor. "But I didn't know what I was getting into." His internal monologue as he sat in the defendant's chair was a storm of regret. "I should have walked away. I should have burned that damn ledger." Eddie Malone, volatile and erratic, lashed out during cross-examination, accusing the LAPD of framing him to cover their own corruption. His outburst cost him sympathy with the jury, but Delgado saw truth in his desperation. "He's a small fish," she told Whitaker. "Someone's using him as a scapegoat." Eddie's nights were sleepless, plagued by nightmares of prison bars and Costa's enforcers. Victor Salazar remained stoic, but his wife's testimony broke the courtroom's silence. "He changed after the strike," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He hated the police, but he never wanted this." Victor's grudge against the LAPD had driven him to the heist, but now, facing a potential 20-year sentence, he wondered if his revenge had been worth it. His inner thoughts were a quiet litany: "I wanted them to pay. But I'm the one paying now." Marianne Holt's testimony was the trial's emotional peak. She confessed to providing the safe's combination, her voice barely audible as she described her husband's medical bills and her fear of losing him. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," she said, her hands clutching at tissue. The jury's faces softened, but Klein was merciless, painting Marianne as a traitor who'd sold out her colleagues for cash. Marianne's nights were spent praying, her guilt a weight she couldn't shed. On March 28, 1973, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Tommy Brennan was convicted of grand theft and conspiracy, sentenced to 15 years. Eddie Malone, guilty on lesser charges, got 7 years. Victor Salazar, convicted for aiding and abetting, received 10 years. Marianne Holt, in a surprise ruling, was granted leniency for her cooperation and sentenced to 3 years probation and community service. As the gavel fell, Whitaker watched Callahan slip out of the courtroom, his face unreadable. "This isn't over," Whitaker muttered to Delgado. The $2.3 million was never recovered. The weapons crate remained missing, a ghost haunting the case. The ledger's fragments were sealed as evidence, but key pages, allegedly detailing Callahan's ties to organized crime, were mysteriously lost in transit to the FBI's archives. The press howled about a cover-up, but the city moved on, eager to bury the scandal. Years later, in 1985, Whitaker sat in a quiet diner in San Pedro, now retired and nursing a coffee. The heist still gnawed at him. Tommy, released after serving 10 years, had vanished, rumored to be living under a new name in Mexico. Eddie, out after 5 years, died in a bar fight in 1979, his debts unpaid. Victor served his full sentence, returning to his family a broken man, his grudge replaced by resignation. Marianne, her husband gone, lived quietly, volunteering at a local hospital to atone for her sins. Callahan retired in 1975, his reputation tarnished but intact, thanks to political allies. The ledger's secrets, whatever they were, never surfaced publicly. But Whitaker had heard whispers. A high-ranking official, now deceased, had been the fourth man, the Gauloise smoker, pulling strings to protect Callahan's empire. The truth, like the money, was buried deep. In 1992, a construction crew demolishing an old warehouse near the port uncovered a hidden compartment in a concrete wall. Inside was a rusted metal box containing $50,000 in weathered $100 bills, part of the heist's haul, and a single sheet of paper, a ledger page listing a payment to RC for services rendered. The discovery made headlines, but no new charges were filed. The statute of limitations had expired and Callahan, long dead, was beyond reach. Whitaker, reading the news in his modest Pasadena home, lit a cigarette, not Gauloise but a Marlboro, and exhaled slowly. "Some truths come too late," he said to no one, staring at the faded case file on his desk. The heist was closed, but its shadows lingered, a reminder that justice, like truth, is often incomplete.